Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Today we're going to talk about, one or two medicinal plants and one that's a great plant for foraging, a wild edible. And this week they're all going to be trees and shrubs, and they're real easy to identify. I think you're going to enjoy, especially some of the uses of the medicinal one, but I want to start, as always, with the plant from my spring foraging cookbook, and this is really what I look forward to every year. And I always say start by identifying trees. If you want to learn either herbal medicine or foraging, start by identifying trees. They're just easier to identify than like the millions of little green plants on the ground. You can learn to identify, for instance, redbud very quickly, very quickly. It's a leguminous tree, and it's known for its bright magenta to purple red flowers in the spring. It's one of the first trees to bring color after the winter. I mean, it'll be like March. I mean, yeah, like literally next month, you can begin looking for redbud, depending where you are. Now, where I live in the mountains, it's a little too cold for redbud. So this is one, when I'm off the mountain, I look for it, and I harvest as many of the flowers as I can. The flowers are absolutely delicious. Now, as I said, it's a leguminous tree. What does that mean? Well, it means it's in the Fabaceae family. It is in the same family as beans and peas, believe it or not. Yes, it's a tree. And it's in the same family as beans and peas and clovers and vetch and wisteria. There are so many. There are literally tens of thousands of members of this family of plants. And many of them are toxic. Many of them are among our most important edibles, though. This tree is just a few genes removed from lentils or chickpeas, and it's a tree, and that's pretty cool. But because of that, the flowers taste like sweet garden peas. So when it's like, cold and damp and dark in March and it's just really nasty weather, if you live where there's some redbud trees, grab a bowl or a basket, go harvest as many of the buds. They're better when they're in the bud stage before they open. And you've got like fresh garden peas that you didn't have to work to plant. Now, of course, early spring peas, especially if you start them in the wintertime, you could be starting your peas right now, and some beans, but definitely sweet spring peas you can be starting right now. Snow peas certainly, and by March they're pretty much ready to be set out, and they're going to start growing, and you're going to have a nice crop of peas coming in pretty early anyway. But this is one that can fill that gap. It's what our ancestors used to call the hunger gap. The time last year's garden was done, you can plant seeds, but nothing's going to be coming in for a while. So they turn to wild edible plants. So our ancestors absolutely ate things like redbud blossoms, ramps. the early plants like fiddlehead ferns, the early spring greens, like chickweed pretty much grows all winter, but early wild mustards and winter cress. That's what kept people alive. And it's free food. It's not only free food, but it's incredibly good for you. I mean, hopefully you've been watching the Robert Kennedy Jr. hearings this past week to find out that, yes, most of our government is completely bought off by the pharmaceutical lobby. Every member of Congress and the Senate has from 7 to 30 lobbyists from each drug company specifically assigned to them, putting millions of dollars in their pockets. And the last thing they want Americans to do is eat healthy. They want us to be sick, so we take a bunch of drugs. That's what it comes down to. And that's not, the leading cause of death in America is medical abuse, malpractice, overprescription. Those three things combined kill more people than heart disease, diabetes, and car crashes, or certainly gun violence, okay? Now, you can like or not like RFK Jr., whatever your opinion on vaccines, I don't really care. But I think we can all agree that the American diet is horrible. And it's mostly horrible because of the USDA and the food pyramid that made everybody diabetic. And all these companies and this is, the big food companies too, they are lobbying government to make sure that they can put as many chemical additives in our food so they can make the food cheap, so they can actually basically addict us to certain foods. Whether it is a chemical property or it's the flavor combinations, like in certain chips and such, and the dyes, you can actually get somewhat chemically addicted to certain processed foods. But even if that was not the case, people who just get used to growing up on old Doritos, for instance, it's such a potent pack of flavor in one bite. Other more healthy foods just taste bland to them, and that's what they begin to crave. Sweet white bread with a bunch of sugar in it, soft drinks with a bunch of high fructose corn syrup. And whether it's a chemical addiction or it's just a food preference that's developed, it's led to Americans being basically the most unhealthy people on the face of the earth. And I'm sorry, but I think it should be a bipartisan agreement that we would want to fix that. I'm not sure how people think that. I don't know. I grew up basically in a hippie town, fairly Democrat family, and we were always question government, don't trust government. And now you turn on the TV, it's you must obey, and don't question government. I almost cursed right there. But you can get out of here if you're telling me I must obey and listen to the experts. Someone who says I am science and you can't question me. No one should be that arrogant, and that is actual fascism. That is actual fascism, where you have business entities lobbying and funding the politicians who turn around and mandate you use their products, or restrict the system so only their products can be sold. That's the actual definition of fascism. And, I'm sorry to say, we've seen a lot of fascists in the Senate hearings for RFK Jr., and I don't agree with him on a lot of stuff. But I think we should all agree that we want healthy food. Clean air, clean water, healthy food. And for me, a big part of that is not just growing your own garden so you know where things come from, not just buying from local farmers. It's eating seasonally, and it's eating wild foods. My ancestors, my great-grandparents, I say it over and over, they all lived to be around 100. If they weren't killed in a war or injured in an accident or something like that. Now, I did have, one side of my family has some genetic kidney issues, okay, and that has been an issue, especially for pregnant women, obviously. So I can't say everyone in my family lived to be over 100 or into their late 90s, but the vast majority did. Vast majority. There's one just post-Civil War that basically worked himself to death and died of a heat stroke in the fields. But his children all lived into their 90s. And why? Well, probably because they were eating farm fresh, real food, no chemical preservatives, no additives, none of the crap that the government has forced down our throats since the 1950s, and a lot of wild foods. A lot of wild foods. Every single plant on earth has a unique nutritional profile. Whether it's, I mean, don't even worry right now about vitamins and protein and fat contents and all that. I'm talking flavonoids. The flavonoids that occur naturally in things like redbud blossoms. They are that bright purple, and I mean, they're so good for you. And they taste like sweet peas. So, first thing in March, I'm out gathering redbud blossoms, and they're great in salads. If I've got some, I try to overwinter some salad greens in cold frames, try to do microgreens, but however I can get some lettuces and various spinaches and cold weather leafy greens, I meant to say. Toss in some redbud blossoms with some ramps or store-bought onions or wild onions or spring onions, which is another thing I can get going in the garden. Chives, pretty much over winter. Yeah, chives and parsley I have all the time, so I can always throw together a salad like this. But really great. And so they have that sweet pea flavor. Now, just briefly sauteed with olive oil or butter and salt, they make an excellent side dish. Again, they taste like sweet peas, so you could use them like sweet peas. But most often, I'll just toss a few on the plate as a garnish. I mean, you want to impress some, especially a young lady, garnish your plate with pretty flowers. They really like that, especially when they taste good. So, redbud blossoms, violets, nasturtiums. Nasturtiums have a wonderful peppery flavor. I use those a lot. The flavor's sweet with just a touch of a slightly unique wild taste. And I think it's one of the plants I show to kids all the time in the spring, when I'm doing, whether it's a plant walk or I'm just walking around and I encounter a family and the kids are running around. I'm like, let me show you something cool. This is a redbud tree and these blossoms are edible, and they start eating them like candy. And of course you have to warn them, hey, you may be allergic to this, parents take care, and it's up to you if you want to let them eat it. But, it's a good thing to do, teach kids how to survive. And often another flower that's coming in about the same season is forsythia. Bright yellow, beautiful flowers of forsythia. They're very bitter, but if you pick off the stem end with where the white part is at the base of the flower, they're mildly bitter. Okay, they're more like a radicchio type of bitter. So you combine those slightly bitter flowers, they're actually rather perfumey, with the sweet redbud blossoms, and you got a really nice combination. A really great way to use it, and this is one of my signature dishes, is to use spring flowers with a poached fish. We got tons of trouts in the streams in the mountains, and so fish is a big part of my diet, and this dish just screams spring. I mean, it really does. Again, I usually use trout, but I think you could use pretty much any mild tasting fish. I wouldn't try to do this with a catfish or something. You're talking a firm flesh, you're talking a nice mild fish. Certainly sea trout, weak fish, speckled trout, whatever you call them in your area would be perfect if you're looking for a coastal fish. Sheep's head. What is the one? Oh, my word. The one that's used so often in Louisiana. Gaspergoo, what is that? A shell cracker? I think it's a drum. It's a drum. Okay, perch would be fine. Really good. So, and I mean, I love tenkara fishing. It's a Japanese style of fly fishing. So, I have a lot of trout. That's all I'm saying. So I'm going to usually make this with trout. So as always, you can tailor this to your taste. We're going to cook this. We're going to poach this fish, I should say, in a court bouillon. Now, that's a French technique. I'm half French or so, and this is, part of my family cooking. But, I'm also part Cajun and Creole. And if you have eaten a lot of Cajun and Creole cooking, you may have heard it called a courbillon. Now, court bouillon and coubillon, I guess, is really the way it's more often pronounced in Louisiana. Not being from Louisiana, just sharing the heritage. My pronunciation is probably not perfect. Same concept. It's a poached fish. Totally different ingredients in the two. I'm going to do more of a classical French style with trout because the trout is so mild. I want to enhance the flavors, not really cover it up with a lot of strong flavors. If you were using saltwater fish, you could definitely go with a more spicy mix like they would more in Louisiana. So anyway, traditional French court bouillon is a broth made with water, chopped onions, some peppercorns, a bay leaf or two, a handful of parsley, and maybe a few other mild aromatic herbs. Celery tops, chopped carrot, several slices of lemon, that's really important, a cup of white wine, and some cloves. There's a big list, but it's really a mildly flavored aromatic broth. Bring it to a low boil, then reduce to a simmer. Poach your fish in this liquid and taste it. Now, when we're poaching fish, it actually happens very quickly. And with delicate fish like a trout, you either want to lower it into the water, basically on a fish spatula or something that'll hold it, so you can lift it up intact, or wrap it in cheesecloth and put it in, because when it cooks through, when the fish is ready to flake, it'll easily fall apart. So totally up to you if you want to do that. That's if you're doing a fancy plating for somebody, keep the fish intact. If you're doing it for yourself, if it falls into 4 or 5 chunks, just put them on your plate and don't worry about it. I mean, I'm a home cook. Certainly for myself, I'm not going to worry about it whatsoever. After you poach your fish in there, especially if if you're doing more than one, and you really should if you're going to that much trouble, the liquid, it makes a nice soup. It's just a nice aromatic fish soup you can eat on the side. So nothing is wasted here. Remember, the best kitchens waste nothing. Now, if your fish does fall apart, you can absolutely eat it as is, or you can make fish patties out of it. Combine it with some breadcrumbs and maybe some more chopped onion or chives, and some egg, a beaten egg. Some people put a little mayonnaise in there. I don't do that. Pan fry them. This is just a nice way of cooking fish, and you can eat it as is. You can make it into a croquette. You could make it into, you can use it for casseroles. You could do fish meatballs, very common in like Sweden and such. You can do it, anyway, you could put the fish meat in an omelet. You could just pick the bones out and use the meat however you want. Or you just plate it and you put a nice sauce on top. If it's lean, I would definitely use a very lean fish. I would definitely use a butter-based sauce. So next, I would do a pan sauce, just butter, a few herbs, maybe a little chive, maybe a little marjoram or something. No, but let me think. What would be really good in there? A little fennel, dill. Dill always goes wonderfully with fish. When you do that, basically get your pan sauce going. Put your herbs in, your onions, whatever you're doing. And just a little bit of butter, a little fat, get them cooked through. Turn the heat off, put in cold butter and mix it in, and that creams the butter. It gives a nice thick sauce. Certainly you could throw some nuts in there if you like that flavor. But anyway, poached trout, put some butter on it or a sauce, and just sprinkle some redbud flowers, redbud and forsythia, a few violets. Absolutely fantastic. It's pretty. It's really a gorgeous dish. You'd pay a fortune for it at a French restaurant. It's a little feminine looking, so it really is a nice one for entertaining. It's nice. The flowers give it a nice, fresh, bright taste. It's got the brightness of the lemon juice and the white wine coming from the court bouillon. Serve the broth as a soup on the side. You go with it at that. I mean, it's sort of a light meal. Of course, I'd put it over a bed of mixed spring vegetables like ramps, wild garlic, fiddlehead ferns, asparagus. Cook them up in bacon fat and crumble some bacon on top. Give me a little more heartiness to my meal. Rice, perfect accompaniment to it. Nice pilaf. But really, with that soup on the side, a chunk of hearty, fresh-baked sourdough bread is fantastic. And sop up the drippings, from the bacon and the butter on the bottom of the plate, and dip it in the soup. And oh man, my mouth's actually so watering so much right now. I can barely talk. You could also, of course, make a roux-based sauce, butter and flour, and stir in some of that poaching liquid, some of that court bouillon liquid. That's a wonderful sauce, and that's super simple, very traditional. Equal parts butter and flour, so like a tablespoon butter, tablespoon flour for 1 or 2 servings. Put it in the pan, just kind of whisk it together until the flour's cooked, but not darkened. Keep it just till it smells cooked. We're not looking for a dark roux here. just a blonde roux, as you would call it. Take maybe a cup of that poaching liquid and just drizzle it in a little bit at a time. And of course, you could add a little cream to that. That would be almost more like a velouté. You could add cheese, more like a Mornay. And those are specific sauces. They're I'm sure I have recipes for them in my Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking. If not, pull them up on the internet. I mean, there's a classical sauces. The formulas set down by Escoffier back in the 1800s, and everybody pretty much makes them the same way with their own little variations. And those are both fantastic with seafood. I mean, a lot of people are funny about mixing dairy with fish. I guess it goes back to Jewish dietary rules. But a Mornay sauce with cheese in it, with crab meat or scallops or anything, actually, that's like mind-blowingly good. And last week we went through how to make stocks, and that's what you do with your stock. You make 100 different sauces, just taking a cup or a few tablespoons of that stock and mixing it with other ingredients. And again, I said stock is the heart of traditional European cooking, but actually most cooking in just about everywhere in the world. It is certainly the foundation. I would say this. I guess what? There are three foundations to all French sauces. That's what French food is known for, is the sauces. One is certainly stock. The other is roux, the butter and flour. And the third, I guess, would just be milk. They always said milk is a natural fond, a natural sauce. And so, learn those basic techniques, and you could do 100 different things with this, fish and redbud and a few other ingredients. And I mean, that's the way I cook. I don't walk in and think I'm going to make this today, right? I look at my ingredients. I try to use what's seasonal, and I think, well, what can I do with this? And I come up with a dozen ideas, and I pick the one that just appeals to me the most. But obviously, in order to do that, you have to have ingredients on hand, which means you have to have a garden. You have to go out and forage. You have to go out and fish. Otherwise, you're running back and forth to the grocery store, buying this and this and this, and hoping you have everything in the pantry and the refrigerator you need. And that's it's not the most fun way to cook, I don't think. I like to be spontaneous and, again, eat seasonally. And I think that's the key to health. It's certainly the key to eating a lot of really interesting, unique foods. I mean, so many of us just eat the same meals over and over. The same thing every couple of weeks. And, I'm kind of bad for that myself, because there are certain things I crave, like marinara sauce or nice, hearty spaghetti with beef in it and everything. Or, I do really like a lot of marinara sauce. I always make it from scratch. So I'll do chicken parm, or I'll do pork chops and bake them in that, and pasta. And, that's going to be a go-to a lot of times. My favorite Asian soups that I make, definitely a lot of Southern recipes, Southern fried chicken, country-style steak, rice and gravy. But into those, even though that the main course may be something I have fairly frequently, these seasonal ingredients keep things interesting, and they keep that variety of nutrition. And that's sort of my philosophy of cooking. Keep it as really interesting. I've been down staying with my mother for a while in the different part of the state where I usually am, in the mountains, thanks to hurricane damage and all that. And gotten to know some of the neighbors. And one of them's bought a lot of my wooden spoons, carved wooden spoons and different bowls and such as that. And it was interesting. The other day he described me as close to the earth. I thought, what an odd thing to say, but it's fairly accurate. I do like to live close to the earth, and I think one time an ex-girlfriend asked me, "What's your philosophy of life?" And I said, "Well, basically, I'm an antebellum Catholic Taoist. I like to live the old agrarian Southern lifestyle. Catholicism is my guiding principle for all issues of morals and doctrine. And then Taoism is really very natural philosophy for me, living in the natural cycles of nature and with the seasons. And, someone else the other day said, "How do you deal with stress?" And I said, "I don't." And she's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I opt out. I opt out. If it's something I can't change, why would I worry about it? If it's something I can change, then I need to work to fix it. And either way, I'm not experiencing any stress. There's no frustration. There's no anxiety. Tomorrow's going to, if I take care of it today, tomorrow's going to take care of itself. Basically, everything we do today lays a foundation for tomorrow. And if a hurricane comes in and blows everything away, you just roll with the punches. You just deal with it. Anyway, I think that's a better way to live than a lot of the stuff I see online. Everyone seems to be having issues with anxiety and depression and taking pills by the ton for it, by the pound on a weekly basis. And that's not good. That's not good for anybody except the drug companies and the doctors and the huge medical corporations and insurance companies that essentially run our society. And anyway, already been on that topic today. So now let's talk about a couple of medicinal herbs. Calycanthus. Now this one I love. It's called sweet shrub, and I don't know. It probably grows somewhere near you. We have eastern sweet bush or Carolina allspice. That's really the one I use a lot. There's also one called California allspice. This is a shrub that has a flavor like allspice, honestly, a scent. I believe it's closely related to what they call pimento. I think that's what they call it. Is it pimento? Maybe. In Jamaica, that they grill their meats on. A shrub that has a spicy, allspice-like flavor. Now, of course, pimento is a type of pepper, but I think that actually is what they call that plant in Jamaica. I'd have to double check on that. So anyway, I found this plant years ago. I mean, when I was a teenager out wandering around the woods, probably preteen, I don't even know. And I smelled this. Wow, I was like, what is that? It smells like cinnamon, allspice, cloves. And I found this bush. And, I took a twig and chewed on it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. And so I've been a huge fan of the plant ever since. There are two native to my region, Calycanthus floridus. So there's one that is native to Florida. And Calycanthus floridus variety glaucus, which is sweet Betsy or smooth sweet shrub. So there are actually several, really. Anyway, Carolina allspice, which is the one most common in my region. I don't know why they said the two Florida varieties were. Anyway, yeah, the two Florida varieties do grow here, but I think that's more in the eastern part of the state. In the mountains where I live, there grows the Carolina allspice. Medicinal use. It is antispasmodic, disinfectant. The plant contains an alkaloid which has a depressant action on the heart. It means it actually slows the heart rate. Probably could be dangerous in large amounts, but in the amounts that I use it, no, I've never had a problem, but it's a relaxing plant. Fluid extract has been used as an antiperiodic, menstrual issues. A tea made from the root or bark has a strong emetic and diuretic effect. So emetic means it's going to make you throw up. You could use this essentially as an Epikec. Epikec's been pulled from the shelf. What do you do now if a kid eats something that's poisonous? You have to induce vomiting, but now we don't have Epikec. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So certain herbs like lobelia are, I think, good to keep on hand, but you got to make your own decisions. And diuretic for kidney and bladder ailments. A cold tea has been used as eye drops in the treatment of failing eyesight. Probably a astringent type property, tightening and pulling out inflammation from the tissue of the eyes. That's, like you would use Visine. I'm just guessing on that because I haven't used it for that purpose and they don't go into detail. But usually when you see a bark extract or strong decoction used as an eye drop, that is the action of it. It's an astringent and anti-inflammatory property. An ooze from the bark has been used to treat children's sores, whilst an infusion has been used to treat hives. And again, when you're looking at hives, you're looking at inflammation. And so an astringent anti-inflammatory property is most likely what we were talking about there in the eye drops. And of eastern sweet bush, they said it's a menagogue. That actually means brings on menses. And an infusion of the bark has been used to treat urinary problems. Peterson Field Guide to Eastern Central Medicinal Plants tells us Cherokees use root bark tea as a strong emetic diuretic for kidney and bladder ailments, cold tea used as an eye drop for failing sight, and settlers used the tea as a calming tonic for malaria. Makes sense. All right, so one more, and this one I got a little more information on because it's actually very popular in early America. During the Revolution, the War of 1812, the British kept ships from coming into the port, and Americans did not have tea, and they had come to rely on tea. I mean, obviously that was a big issue with the Boston Tea Party and all that. So many native plants were used in place of tea, and one of the most popular is Ceanothus, New Jersey tea. There are 14 varieties of Ceanothus that have documented use in herbal medicine. So I'm not going to list them all. Only the Ceanothus, gosh, that's hard to say. Ceanothus, Ceanothus americanus, also known as New Jersey tea, is native to my region. And the settlers learned of it from the Cherokee, and the Cherokee used New Jersey tea. When tired in the chest, drink as much of the warm tea as you can vomit. Again, people used to like to throw up a lot. You will find this especially in Native American tribes. They used tobacco, they used holly, Yopon holly, they used lobelia, often in religious ceremonies to induce vomiting. I particularly don't like to throw up myself. So, but the Thomsonian School of Medicine, which started about, around 1850, went through about 1920, their two primary means of treatment for just about anything was induce vomiting and then use cayenne pepper to warm a person and break a sweat, help with a fever. So people used to like to throw up a lot, and that does make sense when you think that most of the ailments of that era came from bad food and water. They were not the first case of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, adult onset, did not show up in America until the 1900s. What was his name? Diamond Jim. He was over 400 pounds. He was sort of a mobster that owned a lot of restaurants and was known to just eat cakes and pastries by the ton from morning to night. And that's the first case of type 2 diabetes. It basically did not exist before then. So when we start talking about how our food system's gotten totally messed up, trace it back, 1916, the Pure Foods and Drug Act, and by 1920 you got somebody with diabetes. Well, anyway, but you also didn't see so many cancers. You didn't see so many heart diseases. What you had a lot of was people getting sick from bad food and water, spoiled food because there was no refrigeration, and bad water because either grazing animals or human feces was getting into it. I mean, just water was not good back then. So always important to have a pure, clean source of water. And our municipal water certainly does not really qualify for that at all. I mean, hey, I think another thing we can all agree on is fluoride's really not good for your brain. Okay? Chlorine and chloramine especially is not good for your gut health. And then, so much of our municipal water is recycled. It's going into the water treatment plant. It's being filtered and aerated. It's coming back out. All those medicines that people are taking, from antidepressants, lithium, that's not going anywhere. Birth control pills, et cetera, it's going from the urine into the water. It's not getting entirely filtered out. Okay, there's no way to entirely filter it out. We are literally taking our neighbor's drugs when we drink a glass of tap water. And I'm sorry, but bottled water is probably even worse because you're getting all the chemicals from the plastic. So, I'm so fortunate to live in the mountains where I have a deep spring. I also have rainwater. I have creeks. I have all kinds of sources for good, clean drinking water. Down here where I am this winter, it's municipal water. It stinks like a swimming pool of chlorine. And I drink a glass of water and I start burping and my stomach gets upset. This water is not good. It's causing inflammation. I can definitely tell that. So I'm having to change my water drinking habits for this winter. Not good. But anyway, The Cherokee said, when tired in the chest, this comes from a Cherokee herbal, by the way, drink as much of the warm tea as you can and vomit. LT, who's one of the medicine men, the medicinal healers, said, he added that when the flowers of this plant are out, snakes are most apt to strike. So when gathering it, look out for snakes. The root and tea make a hot tea for bowel complaints. Drink before bedtime. The Lumbee also used Ceanothus, and they called it red shank. Lumbee healers use red shank to increase the potency of herbal preparations. A poultice made from red shank root, inner bark root of red oak, and mullein leaves was used to treat inflammation and sprains. Makes total sense. Very astringent. The mullein especially is going to help with inflammation. And yeah, the Chippewa used a decoction of the root for constipation and shortness of breath. Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests, written in the 1860s. Of course, the embargoes were now set up against the South, and the South could not get tea or medicine. They hire a French botanist. He comes in, and this is one of his favorite plants that he found. He said this plant possesses a considerable degree of astringency and has been used in gonorrheal discharges. It is applied by the Cherokee doctors as a wash in cancer and may be used wherever astringent is likely to be useful. That cancer, we're probably talking like skin sores, not so much a cancer, which you might call it, well, sort of a canker, but wounds that won't heal and tend to ooze. The Indians employed it in lieu of venerea and preferring it to lobelia. So again, as an emetic. If the case was violent, the root of blackberry was mixed in. Dr. Hubbard prescribes it with advantage in aphthous infections of infants and malignant dysentery and other maladies dependent upon debility. He usually combines it with a little borax. We don't use borax much in medicine anymore. And infusion of the leaves was employed during the War of Independence as a substitute for tea. I have experimented with the leaves and obtained a liquor somewhat resembling common tea, both in color and taste. It imparts to wool a fine, persistent cinnamon color. He says, since the beginning of the recent war, I have called attention to our citizens to this plant as a substitute for foreign tea. In a brief communication, having again collected and used it and induced others to do the same, I quote from this article, without any desire to exaggerate, I commend the substitute. It grows abundantly in our high pine ridge. The tea prepared from this shrub, drawn as a common tea, is certainly a good substitute for indifferent black tea, regular tea. Properly dried and prepared, it is aromatic and not unpleasant. I am glad to report it is an article to be used in war times in place of the high-priced commodity, which in every respect it resembles, if it does not equal. Dr. John Bachman also at a later period directed attention to the plant, stating that he had used it for 2 months in his own family, and the leaves should be carefully dried in the shade. King's American Medical Dispensary of 1898 says that Ceanothus americanus is indigenous to the United States and very abundant in the West. Grows in dry woodlands and barrens, flowers from June to August. The leaves are astringent and slightly bitter and have been used as a substitute for tea, to which they have a strong resemblance when dried, both in taste and odor. The root is the medicinal part and has a taste and smell somewhat resembling those of a peach leaf. It has occasionally been used for coloring, and water extracts its active principle, so you could just make a decoction of it, boiling until half the water was reduced. He talks about the tannins and the chemical components and under actions and medicinal uses. Astringent, expectorant, that means it helps you, cough up mucus from your lungs. Sedative, antispasmodic, and antisyphilitic. It is used in gonorrhea, dysentery, asthma, chronic bronchitis, whooping cough, and other pulmonary affections. Using a dose of a strong decoction. It has likewise been successfully used as a wash and gargle for sore mouth, subsequent fever, and ulceration. Beside the uses given above, it has been found to be useful for gastric, hepatic, and a splenic stimulant, and it is in splenic troubles that its action is most favorable. Dr. Scudder states that it is indicated by splenic enlargement, that's enlargement of the spleen, of course, sallow, doughy skin, and an expressionless face. Dr. Webster gives its indications as helping deep-seated splenic pain, even though no enlargement be detectable, and for the pain of splenic hypertrophy, as well as for sympathetic painful conditions depending upon the splenic wrong. That's very interesting. Let's see. Also, it was used for congestion, catarrhal issues, for specific indication use in large spleen, sallow, doughy skin, expressionless countenance, non-inflammatory catarrhal states with profuse secretion. And let's see, getting into the 1900s, Jethro Kloss used it quite a bit. Let's see what he said. It is effective in spasms and is very effective in syphilis and gonorrhea when combined with fringe tree and golden seal. It is good for sick headache, acute indigestion, and nausea due to poor activity of the liver, which makes a lot of sense. Golden seal's been over-harvested. We would want to use Coptis or Oregon grape root or barberry root in place of that. Use 1 teaspoonful of the granulated red root to a pint of boiling water, steep for 20 or 30 minutes. Drink 1 cupful of this tea before each meal and before going to bed. Red root is also an excellent remedy in diabetes and is commonly used in asthma, bronchitis, and other lung infections. Medicinal Plants of the Southern Appalachian tells us that root decoction was used to relieve constipation with symptoms of bloating and shortness of breath. The Cherokee used the tea as a mouthwash to relieve toothaches. Leaves were used as a beverage tea. Appalachian folk medicine used red root as a gargle for sore throat, thrush, and oral inflammation. Tommy Bass used a decoction of the root to treat prostate inflammation, psoriasis, and glandular swelling. And Tommy Bass was a legendary Appalachian herbalist, very important in preserving the tradition to the modern era. I mean, following the Pure Foods and Drug Act, herbal medicine was pretty much outlawed in America. That's what got rid of the Thompsonian School of Medicine and all that. And if it wasn't for people like Tommy Bass and other people in rural communities, black, white, Indian, Mormon, you name it, we would have lost a lot of our knowledge of herbal medicine. So, very important figure. Getting up to modern use, Botany Today says the root contains many acids, including tannin, and is thus astringent, used in the conventional ways for inflamed tonsils, sore throat, nosebleed, menstrual hemorrhage, etc. Additionally, the root somewhat stimulates electrical repelling between the blood vessels and the red blood cells. Increasing the blood charge helps keep the red blood cells flowing without clumping up. The enhanced flow is especially beneficial for headaches triggered by a heavy dinner when fats flood into the bloodstream. I've never had a headache from overeating. I don't know. Maybe some people do. Increasing the blood charge also facilitates a better exchange between the blood vessels and the lymph tissue. It is beneficial to healthy people under stress, but not a heroic herb to treat sick people. And Plants for a Future states medicinal use of New Jersey tea. Root and bark of New Jersey tea used extensively by North American Indians to treat fevers and problems of the mucous membrane such as catarrh, that's congestion, and sore throat. Current day usage of the root concentrates on their astringent, expectorant, and antispasmodic actions. So it's going to be very good for a cough, in other words. They are employed in the treatment of complaints such as asthma, bronchitis, and coughs. The roots and root bark are antispasmodic, antisyphilitic, strongly astringent. They contain 8% tannin, expectorant, hemostatic, and sedative. They have a stimulatory effect on the lymphatic system, whilst an alkaloid in the root is mildly hypotensive, lowers blood pressure. The plant is used internally in the treatment of bronchial complaints, including asthma, whooping cough, and for dysentery, sore throats, tonsillitis, hemorrhoids, etc. A decoction of the bark is used as a skin wash for cancer and venereal sores. The powdered bark has been used to dust the sores. The roots are unearthed and partially harvested in the autumn or spring when the red color is at its deepest and they are dried for later use. And I think, finally, Peterson Field Guide for Eastern Central Medicinal Plants tells us leaf tea, once a popular beverage. American Indians used root tea for colds, fevers, snake bites, stomach aches, lung ailments, laxative, and as a blood tonic. Root strongly astringent, expectorant, and sedative. Root tea was once used for dysentery, asthma, sore throat, bronchitis, whooping cough, spleen inflammations, or pain. Alkaloid in the root is mildly hypotensive, lowers blood pressure. So, y'all, fascinating trees and shrubs, okay? Like I always say, start with those because they really are among our most powerful herbal medicines. And the there's just fewer of them to have to identify. I mean, you can learn what a pine tree looks like. You can learn what an oak tree looks like. You can learn what a maple tree looks like, etc. in an afternoon, okay? You can teach a kid that in a day. I mean, no problem. Probably in 30 seconds, really. Just a little exposure to nature, and you're going to learn your trees. And once you learn your trees, then learn your shrubs. Then your woody vines, and this is from my book, The Medicinal Shrubs and Woody Vines of the American South. And, of course, they grow everywhere. It just happens to be my region and my perspective, my outlook. Then worry about all the little green things, okay? And then learn to identify the poisonous plants first so you don't use them, and then learn to use the ones you do want to use. The same is very true with mushrooms. Learn to identify the poisonous mushrooms before ever trying to identify the edible mushrooms. Only exception to that would probably be morels, but again, they're two mushrooms that sort of look like morels. I don't think they do. Definitely learn to identify those three mushrooms and eat the morels and leave the other two alone. So I always say morels are the easiest entry point into mushroom hunting. So anyway, y'all have a great week. Next month, start looking out for those redbuds, and I hope you get to do a little fishing and try that wonderful court bouillon recipe. It's high class. It really is. It's easy to make, and it's cheap, very cheap, and very delicious. And if you want to get into a Cajun cool bouillon, it's thicker, it's more pungent, it's more potent. I'm sure there's some recipes online. Look for a video by Kevin Belton does a great job these days. He's probably the best and best known of the TV Cajun cooks. So Creole, he's Creole. Certainly my old favorite Justin Wilson, and I know he made some coubillon. Paul Prudhomme, what a character he was. There are a couple of really great Paul Prudhomme videos on YouTube, and of course Loretta Chase. She was fantastic. And I know there's a series, I don't know if it's currently running or if it was last year on PBS on Loretta Chase and her family's restaurant, Dookie Chase. And that was a real common dish that they made in the restaurant. And I know there was a whole episode on that one. I love that kind of stuff. I mean, being part Creole, man, I don't think there's really anything better than Creole cooking. I mean, I love good Southern cooking. I love classical French cooking. I love Mexican cooking, Spanish cooking, Caribbean island cooking, and that just mixes all that together. That's what Creole cooking is. So we get from the classical techniques to the spiciness to the, it's just, I love it. I just absolutely love it. I really do. But when it does come to mountain trout, I'm going to go with a much more mild court bouillon. And so it just depends on the fish you got. So make your sauce depending on the fish you got. And if you don't want to use white wine, you could, again, depending on the fish you got, you could use beer, or you could just use some stock. Just leave it out. But I think you can get a lot better flavor if you use a few lemon slices and a bright lemony white wine. My opinion, but it's totally up to you. You can always substitute mint for bay leaf if you don't like bay. Anyway, there's just a couple of tips just to wrap up the show. Y'all have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.